three items really caught my eye, and this is the kind of stuff that should pique your interest right away. If they document or write down or say that it only took them 15 months from design to customer shipping, that's kind of scary. That's very fast, and it's commendable. But there's obviously a lot of questions that come into that. They say they don't have much experience with open source. Okay, definitely, my ears prick up when I hear that. And then the key here is the MySQL is used to store everything. So the whole system is in that database. So that gives me a real target to focus in on. Now, again, earlier I mentioned, it's good to have some ammunition, because when they come back at you and start making threats or pushback, it's great to come up with these quotations. And when I can come back to them and say, well, look, on your website here or in this document, you say that it's safe to deploy this system across any network, even the public internet. Okay, you say that remote locations are easily handled. And you say that this thing can operate for years without maintenance of any kind. Okay, this crowd knows where that's going, but other crowds, they're like, oh, okay, yeah, that sounds great. You see where this is going. So having this kind of, having these kind of quotations in your back pocket to put out to them when they push back is a great, have a big cup of, up. So, going to dive into some of the components here of this NetBox, and what we've got here is an HTTP server, and then a MySQL, and then later versions have Postgres. So obviously, as these devices go through different builds and they add more features, they're changing things up a bit, but those are the two databases that they use. Then they have this NmComm custom application that they wrote, and I'm going to talk about that a little later, but that's a really interesting thing, and I think you'll like what I talk about there. And then, of course, you see like FTP and Telnet on security devices, right? So their HTTP server is the go-ahead web server, and in my opinion, that's a poor choice. So you're looking at 16 CVEs out there, and there could be more. I just stopped searching after a while. I was like, well, what else? But not to beat up on go-ahead too much, but it doesn't seem like they've been very responsive to these vulnerabilities. And so if you look at that CV in 2002, go-ahead was contacted on 3 different occasions in the last 3 months, but they supplied no meaningful response. Now, what's interesting about Go-Ahead Web Server is that it's open source and it's free, and you can download it from them for no cost, and I don't even think you have to register. But the thing is if you're going to offer and serve up an open source web package, do us the courtesy and try to maintain it. So here's one of those quotations on the bottom here, and this is from John Elmoss. He's the S2 Security CEO. And this is, data security is a challenge, and unfortunately not everyone has risen to it. So when you look at the SQL server, I was like, wow, this is kind of weird. Okay, typical, it's listening on TCP, 3306. It was outdated, and I was like, 4.0, that really sounds kind of old. I was like, how old is it? End of life. I go to MySQL product archives, forget end of life, end of download. Okay, you cannot download this SQL 4.0 from the MySQL product archives. And that's down here. So, I mean, it's not even worth their bandwidth to host these, even for posterity, even just for archival purposes. So that's in a production server for a physical control unit for your facility. That's pretty troubling. The NmComm is a TCP service, and what this thing does is, this service does is it performs multicast discovery of the HID nodes on the network. And it's a custom daemon, like I mentioned, and then there's a patent. So this goes back to doing your research and looking at all those other information resources. So I go and I look for patents filed by this company and then by certain individuals in the company, and I found this system and method to configure network mode. So there's a tiny URL there, and you can go read the patent, but it reads like an RFC. And this is the perfect type of application that you want to start fuzzing right away. And you can read through that and almost grep for must not. Okay, in this patent, just like you would do in an RFC, grep for must not, and start focusing on that area for your targets. So FTP and Telnet. I mean, clear text protocols for a security device. You see this quotation on the bottom here. We see some vendors fitting their serial devices with telnet adapters, which simply sit on the network transmitting unsecured serial data. Yet in your own device here that you guys build, you have telnet to manage it, and by the way, that runs as root, and that's new. I haven't talked about that before, but there's diagnostic tools that are built into this system that you can access as an administrator. It'll give you a tarball of the diagnostic file that you would send to S2 for debugging and help. But if you go through that, you start seeing directory listings, you start seeing the permission setting on daemons and all kinds of stuff. So that's bad. I mean, telnet's bad, but then running as root, is really, really bad. And then the security documentation you see here is they'll say this is a screenshot. So network administrator task on the FTP server, create a username, password, directory. A password is optional. The backup directory must be created at the root level on the FTP server. I mean, it's like 1997 stuff that you see here. So what's really interesting about these, and I alluded to this at the beginning, is all these new features and this convergence. So that's the other thing we walk out of here. Think about, when you think about security systems, don't think about it as closed. Think about this convergence. Things, they're tied into the cameras. There's going to be communication information and configuration information that's in those cameras to make sure that they can talk back. If you get on a DVR in a network, what's that DVR talking to? There's a lot of network devices that are going to be talking to these, and depending on the configuration and the licensing scheme, you'll come across this. So again, that's increasing the attack surface, and you really got to wonder, like, how are they using voice over IP in a system like this? The burglar APIs. So here's some features. You can pull this up and look at a building's floor plans. That's very useful if you're going to go in and try to steal a server from them. Here's one of the vulnerabilities, and this was the first one that I found, and this is a remote unauthenticated factory reset, okay, via crafted URL. When I was putting these slides together, I was like, what else can I write here? It's like the box, it's like it puts the box in a condition that, when it arrived on your doorstep. Okay, it wipes everything. There's some back and forth with S2 about, what the actual impact is. They say that there's some configuration that's pushed out to the end nodes and to the HID readers, and that there's not going to be, a catastrophic impact, like your cards aren't going to work on the doors. But again, I only had this for a limited time, about a week, hands-on, and didn't really have the chance to do that. But hey, it's a factory reset. I mean, there's not much you can say to that from no auth. Here's the other one that came out, and this is the access to the backup database. So this is an unauthenticated attacker. You can download via HTTP the database backups. Now it's a nightly DB that's hard-coded, okay, in cron. So what that tells you is that you've got a file name here that's predictable, right? You know the time range that it's going to run, and then you know the naming convention. So you can do almost blind wgets for this across systems without knowing anything about it. And you're going to just do those requests, which is horrible logging on this thing. You really have no idea when you're getting attacked. So an attacker gets that backup database, again, referring to that document that MySQL and S2 put out together. Everything's in the database, right? Everything. All your cards, all your names, all your credentials, floor plans, employee photographs, everything is in a database. So here it is. You extract the admin MySQL 64-bit hash, okay, and that affects both the 2x and 3x series with MySQL and Postgres. And then you can, crack that hash, which is trivial. And then there's the CVE for that. So once you have that, the attacker has admin access in the box. What can that attacker do? Well, how about opening some doors? Okay, everybody likes that. You can open a door right now, and there's that smokers area down there, right? So, go have a cigarette, you hang out, a little short chat, and then you whip out your iPhone and go to the HTTP interface of this, and then click open the door, and it's an automatic button, and it opens up right for you. Or you can schedule it for ODark 100 and come back with your crew. So here are the cameras, okay? So the cameras are in the database too, right? And this is actually a screenshot from their demo that was online, and the license actually just expired today. So I can't go to it live, but this is from their demo box. So I'm not out there hitting live boxes. And this affects the 2X and 3X systems. And now the attacker owns all the IP cameras. So what's great here is I'm not just picking on S2, because there's this perception across the industry. So this quotation on the bottom is from Justin Lott, and that's from Bosch Security Marketing. And Bosch is in this EDAC space as well. And he says, most hackers don't care about watching your lobby. If they gain access to the network, they're going to go after financial data and trade secrets. I don't know what you're talking about, okay? I think a lot of people who are trying to attack a building and go in there are going to be interested in looking at the video and looking at the webcams. I would certainly be. So here's the DVRs and digital video recorders. The user pass to those is in the backup. And another thing is there's poor recommendations here by them. And so here it is. They recommend keeping the default user and password on this, right? I mean, it says, you know, right down here at the bottom, we recommend that you use these defaults. And then there's some more HTTP directory grief that I found later on because I was like, oh, I didn't check for this, I didn't check for this, and node logs, which are the logs of the devices authenticating back in, the nodes and the card swipes and all that fun stuff, and then employee photographs, being able to pull those directly. Now here's some remote fingerprinting that's come up, and their Mac OID is registered to S2 security. So that makes it much easier to identify one of these devices just by its MAC address. And then, as I noted before, I contributed to some of the open source tools out there. So there's an Nmap service fingerprint for this in Nmap 5.20. And then another thing is for every IP for these devices, they left in a blank.html page. So that's another way to look for these and confirm that you actually have one. And props to Skipfish on finding that. Shodan. Shodan is a real game changer in my opinion. And I have to give huge props to Shodan on this because I was getting a lot of pushback from S2 about saying that they're difficult to find, that they're not on the internet and all that. And actually the two below that are direct quotations from them, which is, it's behind a firewall, accessible only by VPN, deep within the corporate network. Whatever that means, right? I mean, the front line is everywhere. We know that. So the targeted searches for this, unique fingerprint, and it's been going up. So back in March, there was 150 of these devices on the network that you could identify. Now there's 341. And then here's the search that I did today. So 341, and then here's the string that I'm doing. So here's the go-ahead web server, right? Looking for login ASP, the no cache, and the must revalidate, and then you see those strings showing up in the results down here. So I don't have internet access on this. I'm not going to click on any of these URLs, but I'm very, very confident that those are all Net2 boxes out there of some variant or another. So really getting to some of the recommendations here, it's just not right unless you have a lolcat. Something that you don't think is a threat, you just bring it up and it's like an individual, right? It's like, oh, it's just some guy out there who got a hold of your box for a week, what could he do? What could he find? What impact could he have? How could he change our business processes? You never know, okay? But you get your nose, it's a whole nother story. So I've made recommendations here for them to, conduct security evaluations on your products, better your deployment guides, your third-party integration, right? Those web cameras, those DVRs, don't want to see that kind of bad stuff. And then the, improving their logging. Like I mentioned before, the logging is really bad on this. I mean, there's just nothing there. So you don't even know. I mean, you can tell when somebody else logged in as an admin or another